With the release of Pacific Rim Uprising being available on Blu-ray, I would like to take this opportunity to review the original giant robot versus giant monster film, 2013's Pacific Rim. Without further ado, let's commence the drift, ladies and gentlemen.
Neural handshake initiated.
The movie was made by Guillermo Del Toro, who directed and produced the film. In addition, Guillermo Del Toro and Travis Beacham both wrote the screenplay together. Pacific Rim is a homage to kaiju movies of old like Godzilla, The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, King Kong, and many others. To fight the giant monsters kaiju, you need something equal to level the playing field, no? Well, that's when the giant robots, mecha, come into the equation. Pacific Rim features giant robots called Jaegers that fight the kaiju to stop their invasion of Earth. Also, the Jaegers are an original creation of mecha that's not been seen in the genre before. Pacific Rim was released on July 12, 2013 by Warner Brothers Pictures and Legendary Pictures. The film received positive reception from movie critics and made about $411,003,000 in the box office. Pacific Rim was a success for Warner Brothers and Legendary, albeit timid North American box office sales of $101,800,000. Majority of the box office sales that the film made was from overseas, which came up to a humble $309,200,000. If Pacific Rim didn't have such a strong international box office haul, the film would have been deemed a failure. One of the reasons why Pacific Rim fared better internationally than domestically is because the mecha/kaiju genre aren't widely mainstream in North America. As an action-adventure film, Pacific Rim delivers on both of those accounts, but the movie excels at being a kaiju and mecha film respectively. Seeing both the kaiju and Jaegers on screen fighting each other is completely and utterly awesome. As the viewer, you are totally invested into believing that these giant monsters and giant robots could be real because there's real interaction between them and their environment while kicking each other's arses. An example of this could be when Gypsy Danger and Leatherback are engaged with one another. They're just going at one another like crazy, right, left hooks everywhere, using things ranging from a construction crane to shipping containers as weapons and more. It's quite an elaborate fight scene between Gypsy Danger and Leatherback, which is perfectly satisfying to watch on screen. That's just one of my favorite moments in Pacific Rim that I really enjoyed from the film. The Jaegers and the kaiju are breathless to look at, by the way. The designs of Gypsy Danger, Striker Eureka, Crimson Typhoon, and Cherno Alpha are top-notch in the way of mecha. Who wouldn't want to pilot one of these giant robots, right? The kaiju themselves are menacingly beautiful. You probably wouldn't want to meet any of these giant monsters in a dark alley, no? Here's another thing I enjoyed about Pacific Rim. The movie isn't your typical disaster film because during the course of the movie, the kaiju are attacking countries all over the globe like Russia, Australia, China, and others. Typically, disaster movies are more or less about some malevolent force or event that threatens the entire world. When the said malevolent force commences its reign of destruction, the country that's usually targeted first in disaster movies is none other than the United States. After the fallout of the malevolent force's reign of destruction, the United States typically finds a way to defeat or repel the opposition and usually saves the world. I mentioned that Pacific Rim isn't your typical disaster film, and that's more or less true, but it does follow some of the classic tropes of the genre. What makes the movie different from the whole United States is almighty and powerful scenario is that the entire world pooled their resources together and created the Jaeger program to stop the kaiju. The Jaegers ranged from Russian, Australian, Chinese, American, and more. It was a combined effort from all the countries around the globe, not just the United States.
And this is the point where he goes completely crazy.
Unfortunately, Pacific Rim isn't perfect. There are some discrepancies throughout the movie, but nothing major, just minor. The first problem is the archetype of the characters. Riley. He's basically the retired soldier who comes out of retirement to fight one more war. Mako. She's the green as grass soldier that knows everything about war but never fought in one. She later gets assigned to be Riley's new partner. Pentecost. He's your typical grizzled soldier who's seen it all. Those are the notable archetypes in Pacific Rim. Of course, you have the two scientists, Newton and Herman. Both of them study the kaiju, but in different ways. Newton dissects the kaiju to understand their biology, and Herman creates an algorithm regarding when the next kaiju attack will happen. Both scientists eventually come together on their understanding of the kaiju, but at the beginning, they didn't. The second problem is the set pieces, particularly the night sequences. Majority of the Jaeger and kaiju fights take place at night, and it's somewhat hard to notice what's going on in some of those scenes. However, that doesn't mean you can't see the Jaeger and the kaiju fighting each other, because you could still notice the action that's happening. Due to the nature of these night sequences, though, the darkness kind of drowns the colors out of the characters, which happens to make the set pieces not as spectacular as you would hope. In my humble opinion, these two discrepancies don't ruin the movie for me, but it's just something to keep in mind. Regarding the archetypes of the characters, I'm not annoyed by Riley, Mako, or Pentecost. It's just that we've seen these archetypes before in other movies, which the characters might have been done better.
This is where the good news comes.
The discrepancies that I described are not specifically my problems with Pacific Rim, but the summarized problems that the movie critics had with the film. Personally, I enjoyed the characters of Riley, Mako, Pentecost, Newton, and the others. Pentecost reminded me of characters like Sergeant Johnson from the Halo series and Sergeant Apom from Aliens. Those particular characters were in commanding positions, and they necessarily didn't need you to understand their motives. Instead of me explaining what the commanding officer would have needed from you, I'll let Pentecost explain it himself.
Now, you have no idea who the hell I am or where I've come from, and I'm not about to tell you my whole life story. I do not need your sympathy or your admiration. All I need is your compliance and your fighting skills. Do I make myself clear?
Yes, sir.
Good.
The relationship between Riley and Mako was something different in other disaster movies. Typically, the main actor and actress become a couple by the end of the movie, and that's okay with me, but it always happens in films. I have no problem with romance in movies, but where's the strong and independent characters in film that don't necessarily need companionship? What I enjoyed about Pacific Rim was that Riley and Mako didn't need to become romantically inclined because they were already emotionally connected from the drift. The one absolute thing that I loved about Pacific Rim was that the film made me feel like a kid again watching old kaiju movies like Godzilla specifically, because I grew up watching him. It reminded me seeing Godzilla just wreaking havoc through Tokyo, which was just someone in a rubber or latex suit and rampaging through a miniature set of the city.
But it is pretty cool.
My final thoughts on Pacific Rim is that the film was clearly a labor of love from Guillermo Del Toro, and the movie is worthy to be part of the kaiju genre. Everything from the Jaeger and kaiju designs, to the mythology of Pacific Rim, and to the Jaeger's con pods were given the right amount of time and thought for the film to function properly, and all that attention detail paid off. The film didn't attempt to emulate past kaiju movies, but be its own thing, and that's when Pacific Rim earned its spot in the genre. The movie paid homage to its predecessors by having the common tropes, but using them in a new and different way. Personally, I loved Pacific Rim. The Jaeger/kaiju fight scenes were awesome. The father and daughter relationship of Pentecost and Mako is my highlight for the film, and I suspended my disbelief of reality, which allowed me to be submerged fully into the movie. Overall, Pacific Rim is an excellent action-adventure film that's loaded with entertainment, humor, and surprises. If I had to rate Pacific Rim, I would give it an 8.5 out of 10. You won't be disappointed with buying or streaming the film, I assure you. Well, I hope you enjoyed this review of Pacific Rim. Anyways, I was your humble host, Death in Texas, and I'll see all of you later.
So that's it? It's over?
Pacific Rim was a success. Pacific Rim was a success. Pacific Rim was a success. About some malevolent However, that doesn't mean you can't see the Yegu? Both scientists eventually come together on their understanding of the Kaiju. My final thoughts on Pacific Rim is the film was clearly a labor of love. Love, not love. And if you're jonesing for more Pacific Rim related media, here's some more videos that you can watch.